All right, happy Thursday and happy first cohort web session. I'm Jess and I am your xAPI cohort host. And I am so excited to welcome you to this semester. We are in our 13th semester of cohort. I'm going to share my slide deck now so that we can get started with today's session. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. We're glad you're here. If you want to introduce yourself in chat, let's connect. Share a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself and your pronouns. I'm Jess. I use she, her, and they, them. Share what you prefer to be called, what organization you're with, and then maybe something you're a little excited to learn this semester. We do hope that you engage with us on social media. We use Twitter, and you can connect directly with the cohort through our xAPI Gnome account. And then our speaker today is Megan Torrance, and she's going to be sharing what xAPI is and give a little intro. So feel free to talk up today's session on social media, and we are glad you're here. This is, again, the first web session of the fall 2021 xAPI Learning Cohort, and it is recorded. We record each session so that we can share out the information and learning freely. So we're all here now. Now what? What does that mean? There are officially 464 people registered for the fall 2021 xAPI Learning Cohort. That is a huge number, and we're just getting started. We welcome folks to join cohort at any time. It's never too late to sign up. You can continue to promote and share this opportunity with your friends, colleagues, or anyone you think might benefit from being a part of cohort. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about what xAPI cohort is, and then we'll get into what xAPI is anyway, and what Megan will give a overview and intro of what xAPI is. Just so you know who's behind the cameras and mics, we want you to know I'm Jess and I am the cohort host. We have Aaron here today, who is our producer. We'll switch off between Aaron and Jamie. Jamie is on vacation this week. And then we also have Megan, who will be presenting. Remember, I talked a little bit about that xAPI Gnome account on Twitter. We will also share out after our web sessions the recordings on Twitter. So make sure you're following that account. We also will share out reminders about the xAPI cohort web sessions with topics and speakers. And we share out general xAPI events and news and resources. So if you have Twitter right now, go ahead and use the xAPI cohort hashtag and tag the xAPI Gnome and share one thing you're excited to learn, try, make, witness this cohort. And I'll give you like 7 seconds to think about that. All right, I hope you all are tweeting. So I'm going to hop in and give a high-level overview of what the cohort is and how it works and where all of our moving parts are. And then we'll get into what is xAPI with Megan, and then we'll close out the session with some key logistics and detailed information about how we're moving forward. So the xAPI Learning Cohort is a free, which is my favorite word, which means that it's accessible for anyone, virtual, which also means that it's accessible, vendor neutral, 12-week learning by doing project-based team learning experience and community. In the chat right now, I want you to call out a word or two from this description that really resonates with you. For me, 2 things that really resonate with me are the free and virtual. So when we went into the COVID-19 pandemic, one of the things that was amazing about cohort is that we didn't have to stop what we were doing because we were already a virtual community. I also really value that this is a free space because we're providing opportunities for learning and growing and creating access for anyone, no matter where they are in their learning journey. I also really think that learning by doing and project-based describes where we see the most impact, right? Folks are taking taking what they learn and applying it to project-based learning. And then community is a key element of the xAPI cohort. You have folks who might be just beginning their journey with xAPI, or folks who may have contributed to the writing of the specification. And so having all of these perspectives and different levels of experiences in one place is quite unique and impactful. Cohort happens over the 12 weeks in multiple places. The first place that we have cohort running is here, our meet every Thursday, 12 to 3 p.m. We share the recordings freely on YouTube and on our website. And this is where you'll be introduced to key thought leaders around xAPI, some case studies, industry news, and more practical hands-on opportunities that you can then go take and apply to your team experiences. And then the second level of cohort is happening in project teams. And project teams are mostly happening in Slack and GitHub, in addition to outside meeting times that they're meeting on maybe Google Meets or Zoom, and they're working together whenever they find time. Project teams get to apply what they learn in the web sessions and beyond, and develop projects and test things and prototype and break things and make things together. And then they report out on their learning around week 4, what they're learning in our weekly web sessions. And then each week you'll get a weekly email with updates and the recordings to our web sessions. And that'll go out to you on Fridays. So the way that cohort sort of flows, it's it follows Tuckman's theory of like group dynamics, right? So early on, we're forming, storming, and norming, right? We're getting to know each other. We're getting to know what xAPI is. We're getting to know how this whole cohort thing works together. And that's around weeks 1 through 3. So about a fourth of the semester is spent in that initial period where we're just learning to work together and establishing norms so that we can be productive and collaborative throughout the rest of the semester. The second section of the semester is around digging into details, and that's when your project teams are really getting together and scoping, assigning tasks, and iterating. So you might be trying one thing one week and it doesn't work, and then you're figuring out how to fix it the next week and reporting all of that out. As we get to the end of the semester, we do a lot of application, what's in it for me, demos, next steps, and a lot of share out about your learning. That's one of the key elements of cohort, is kind of working out loud and sharing success stories, and also getting feedback from all of the perspectives within cohort to make sure that you're learning as much as possible and as quickly as possible. This semester, we have a lot of great topics. So for the first third of the semester, we're really diving into what cohort is and what xAPI is. We're getting some hands-on experience around how to send data from things that are e-learning and things that are not e-learning. We get into setting up an LRS and best practices for sending and examining that data. We get into like learning analytics frameworks, how to bridge scorm and xAPI divide with CMI5. We get into some data ethics. We get into xAPI and AI potential. And then we get into the larger learning ecosystem and how xAPI fits into that. Then we move into case studies and project team demos. All right. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and invite Megan Torrance on stage to share out what xAPI is anyway.
Sure thing. Hey, thank you so much, Jess, and welcome everybody. We've got 100 people in the room with us right now. 464 people signed up for cohort. We generally average about 600, 650 per semester, and this community is strong. So I just want to welcome you to something really, really special here. Some of the things that you'll notice if you get out to conferences, whether they're virtual conferences or live conferences, there's always this little moment of, wait, you're in cohort? I'm in cohort too. I did cohort. This was my project, and people connect. If you ever see me out at a live conference, I will have xAPI cohort stickers. And if you really, really want a sticker, you can let us know and we can mail you one in US mail. So this community is powerful. And Jess, I think, gosh, you can enter it in chat. 3,600, 4,000 people in the Slack channel over time. This is the 13th semester that we've run Cohort. So welcome all of you to something really exciting and really special. Every year every semester when we run Cohort, like Jess said, we start with what is Cohort? And a big piece of that is what is xAPI, right? And we'll talk about what is Cohort too, because this is a specification and a level of learning that you may not have ever had access to. This is a kind of learning and an approach and a community that you are joining in progress. And so there's some norms and some information there. But what I want us to do is start us off with what xAPI is and what it is that we're all embarking on. And that's a big part of just getting us started. Now, some of you I know, you know darn well what xAPI is. I'm recognizing you in chat. Brian, Martin, a few other of you Micahs out there, right? I know you know what xAPI is. So go ahead and help each other. And for those of you who are new here, you'll find that one of the cool things about Cohort is that there are experts everywhere, right? So there's lots and lots of people who can help and answer your questions. I'm going to ask a mini poll first, though. Where are you on your xAPI journey? So I am sharing my screen, and if you can't see my screen, somebody shout at me. But what I'd like you to do is enter a 1 if you can spell xAPI, a 2 if you know what the X stands for, a 3 if you've actually sent an xAPI statement, a 4 if you've received an xAPI statement, and a 5 if you've made a decision based on xAPI data, which means you can enter more than one number.
I'm seeing a lot of 1, 2, 3s, some 4s in there. I see a 5. See some 4s. Yep, we're
all right. So this crowd, right? So just as your thanks, Jess, if you're looking at this, right? This community has people at all levels of expertise with xAPI, and that's important, right? And that we hold space because there was a point at which all of us, right, we're at the one, right? We're at the one. So we hold space for everybody as they learn. And what that also means is there are experts here who are in that 3, 4, 5 space, right? They're using xAPI data and managing, in some cases, quite large amounts of it. So that's pretty exciting. You're probably here because you have some questions. And these are the kinds of things that we're going to touch on very, very briefly today. But we're also going to spend more time throughout the entire cohort talking about these very same questions. So we're going to spend most of our time today on what is xAPI. And then really the curriculum or the pathway of these 12 weeks, it takes us through all of these questions. As you have colleagues and friends who are also interested in xAPI, by all means invite them. As Jess said, it's never too late to join Cohort. We have people who sign up in the very last week because there's a presentation session or a demo or something that they're interested in. So by all means, come on, the more the merrier. So why are we all here? One thing when I go out and about in the world, right, and I talk to people in learning and development, they're not used to dealing with a lot of data in their space. In fact, most functions within your organization, if you have an organization of any size, have better data and more data, excuse me, than we do in learning and development. So this is Google Analytics, right? Lots and lots of very, very rich data, okay, that's been free and available on the web for 15, 20 years. In fact, my favorite part of this entire screenshot is, whoops, not that. It's right here. Look how old this is. This is old news. Right? Most sales systems, in fact, every sales system that could possibly be one you would be worth paying for, right, has more information about customers, products and services, how long it takes to make a sale, what else gets sold at the same time, which people are better performers than others, right, than our learning management systems have. Okay? Now, some of our learning management systems have a lot of information, right? Or some of our learning platforms, right? Not LMSs necessarily. Some of them do, but other learning platforms have a lot of information. So this is mom peeking over the shoulder of my daughter when she was in middle school, right? Taking a math class in Khan Academy. This is pretty cool information. Think about, right, what you could do if you had this kind of data about exactly where your learners are struggling. This is pretty awesome, right? The trick is this was completely isolated from anything else that my daughter had access to or that my daughter was working with or her teachers. So her math teacher didn't know she was doing this and didn't have any insight into the kinds of things that Emily was struggling with or not, right? And so where Khan Academy can use where are you struggling to steer you into learning paths that help you resolve those gaps, right? That same level of granularity was absolutely invisible to her math teacher. What's more, when my daughter transferred to a different school, right, the old school printed out a PDF of her transcript and faxed it, like with a fax machine, to the new school. So all they saw was math A. They didn't see a middle schooler doing pre-calculus, but struggling with whatever the heck sinusoidal equations are. Right? So even in learning and development, sometimes we have really great and amazing platforms, but they are black boxes that don't talk to anything else. If you have a Fitbit, go ahead and shake it and give yourselves a couple extra steps. If you have a Fitbit, you probably have more information about your health and well-being and perhaps that of your friends, right, than most of us have about what's going on with learning with our organizations. So if you were to, and Jess, this is another space where I'm going to ask you to support me. So just so we all know, in AirMeet, we love AirMeet, but one of the bummers of AirMeet is that the speakers can't see the chat at the same time. So unless we have multiple screens, which I don't today. So do me a favor. Say you were to get a new job and you had the opportunity to choose between onboarding plan A and onboarding plan B. Which would you choose, A or B, and why? It's the why that's interesting. So type this all together. Do you choose A or B, and why? So Jess, what are we seeing?
I'm seeing some B's because it's interactive and hands-on. I am seeing some A's. B's, experiential learning included. B, mentorship and job shadowing. B, since it's more in depth and adapted to whatever knowledge. B, of course, because it's personable. B, because of the observe, practice, and job shadow. B, because it's more robust. A, awesome. Is too much e-learning, so I'm choosing B.
So Jess, of the people who are choosing A, any reasons why?
A is a curriculum.
Okay. A is also, thanks Jess, A is also reportable. I can report on A and tell you if everybody's doing it. I can ensure there's a consistent experience and everybody is getting it, right? And I can follow up with people. B is tricky because some of these things are hard to catch data about in our current scorm-based LMS world. So what we're looking at here, right, is onboarding plan B is all the things that we as learning professionals want to be delivering, right? A is scalable, repeatable, trackable, right? The promise of xAPI is that I can get both, right, in the same package. I can get the scalability of plan A and the flexibility and personalization of plan B. So let's talk about what this xAPI is, because I just painted a picture which makes it sound amazing. And it is pretty good, cool, but I want to make sure that we're talking about what it is and isn't. Right? xAPI doesn't do anything. xAPI is the language by which we talk about what gets done. So xAPI is the language that we would talk about, right? How somebody rated a learning experience, whether or not they watched the video, how much of it, where did they pause, what did they scrub back, did they turn the closed captioning on. xAPI will not serve up the assessment or be the assessment, but it will help us keep track of, right, how did somebody report their skills. Right? So these kinds of things, right, what were the notes that the mentor took? How did the activities get practiced? So xAPI isn't doing the thing. xAPI is how we report on it. So it's our specification for sending, storing, retrieving data about learning and performance. So let's talk about something really important here, right? So xAPI, right? The X stands for experience, okay? Not learning. Right? We're going to spend a lot of time talking about learning, but it's learning and performance, all sorts of on the job and in the world kinds of experience that we can report on. And then an application programming interface, or API, right? API is my layperson's description of that. It is agreement, right, for how we are going to transfer data from one system to the next. Right? It's an agreement and a protocol for how we're going to do this. If I post something in LinkedIn and I have my Twitter account connected in, and I say, yes, I want this post to go to LinkedIn and to Twitter, and that automatically happens. I post in LinkedIn and it arrives in Twitter. Bam, that's because of an API. My Slack, I have a Slack channel that ingests whatever Twitter, right, whatever mentions in Twitter on my particular account, that comes into my Slack, and I read it in Slack. So effectively, I'm reading what I did in LinkedIn in Slack. That's because of an API. xAPI is one specific API, right? And it's only used in the singular because it is right, a specification. There are multiple APIs involved, but we talk about it in the singular. We don't put an S on the end of it, right? And so this is one example of a kind of API. So what I like to do, I just came back from the ATD International Conference, and I like to go up and down the aisles and say, hey, does this tool use xAPI? And if the answer is, we have all sorts of APIs, that tells me they probably don't have the one I care about, right? And it's so that's an important thing as you evaluate vendors. And further up in the chat this morning or this afternoon before we got started, I did add an article that I had co-authored with Art Workentine on evaluating your vendor about their use of xAPI. But why do we need xAPI? So we have this thing called scorm, and scorm has been really our industry's go-to data specification for 2 decades. SCORM means that every single e-learning course in every single LMS on the planet, right, is recording in the same information in the same ways. This is pretty unique for an industry. It's not the only thing, right? We're not the only industry that does this, right? But if you think about it, it's kind of like having a USB, right? I don't have to ask, is this USB made by manufacturer A or manufacturer B or whatever? As long as, right, I'm using the right USB, my mouse, my power strip, my all sorts of things plug into any USB port that's out there, right? And yes, I know there's USB-C and several different varieties of it, right? But that gives me a lot of interoperability. It means I can buy an expensive phone and plug it in with a cheap cord if I want to. With SCORM, it means that I can switch authoring platforms and everything still works in my learning management system. I can switch learning management systems and all my old authoring platforms work. I can switch vendors and service providers. right? And all the stuff works because it all agrees to right, this very straightforward vocabulary, right? In these nice, neat little SCORM zip packages, right? xAPI has been good for our industry, right? It means there are very low barriers to entry, right? It means anybody. I got into this space, right, as an independent contractor with a laptop and $1,200 worth of software about 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Oh, a really long time ago, right? We won't talk about that, right? SCORM is geek free. I don't know about you, but I don't write SCORM. I make e-learning courses. I focus on the instruction and the media and the learner experience and the whole 9 yards. SCORM is magically happening behind the scenes, and I never have to worry about it, right? We talk about the interchangeable and the interoperable, right? That's pretty awesome. But interchangeable and interoperable only work with e-learning, right? So how many times has somebody asked you, right? Well, can the LMS score completion of my PDF? Or how do I know, right, that people are doing their follow-up practice or their coaching or their performance support, right? Those things aren't reported into LMS because those things don't speak SCORM. Hence, xAPI. So where SCORM is a vocabulary, I like to think of xAPI as a grammar, right? And with this grammar, as long as I follow the grammar properly, I can say anything I want to, including marvelously rich run-on sentences that my English teacher would never, ever approve of. But with xAPI, we can pack all sorts of very interesting information in here. And so instead of a nice, neat little package, right, I like to think of xAPI like the Lego store. I can go in and buy just the Death Star kit. Take it home, open up a million bags of Legos all over the floor, and make just that experience. Or I can go into the Lego store and buy the Death Star kit and the Rainbow People and the Female Scientists set and the Black Panther ship and the robotics. I can buy third-party manufactured parts on eBay. I can rent the 3D printer from my library in town and make my own bricks. And they all go together because they all agree to follow the grammar of bumps and grooves that make Lego bricks work. They call it a system of play, right? And that's what we want. That will get us that interoperability with xAPI. So before we go on, Jess, do we have any questions or anything notable in the chat before I go on to just some basic vocabulary words to get us started?
They're appreciating your comparisons and analogy and wanting your library.
Okay, by the way, my little town's library was in 2008 or 2006 voted one of the best small libraries in America. So I do have an amazing library. So fantastic, right? So let's move on from my amazing little library, right? So let's talk about some basic components that you'll need and vocabulary terms that you'll need in order to get started with xAPI, right? So here you are looking very, very intently at your work. Just make me happy here. We're going to give you some PPE. All right. So right, let's use this as this setup here as a metaphor, right? So I have a learning record provider, right? My learning record provider is whatever sends the data. Right? So in an e-learning environment today, right, your e-learning courses send SCORM data back to your learning management system. Right? So an e-learning course could be a learning record provider. How about in the chat, what else could be a learning record provider? And Jess, you don't have to read them all, but just like read a few of them that seem common and likely.
Absolutely. And you have a question too.
Oh, awesome.
CMFI and xAPI improvement. And then we have, so I don't know if you want to answer that now or you want me to start reading some of the examples of learning.
I will take the CMI5 question in a moment.
All right. There's CRMs, videos, YouTube videos, Canvas, forms and surveys, mobile apps.
You got it. All of those. And interestingly enough, right, somebody said Canvas. Canvas is an LMS. So yes, an LMS can be a provider of learning records, even though we typically think of them as a storehouse of learning records. Absolutely. All of those things, anything we can digitize, right? So I even have an app that digitizes the flip charts in a face-to-face classroom, okay, and stores them as xAPI statements. So I can store that record, that artifact of what happened in that instructor-led classroom, right, with the with the LMS record, right, of that participation. So anything I can digitize, right, and that can send data, okay, can be a learning record provider. Now let's think about your content, right? And your content in this example isn't going to change, really. You're still going to teach courses. You're still going to run practice sessions. You're still going to do evaluations. You're still going to do assessments, all that kind of stuff. Now, yes, for those of you who are thinking ahead, absolutely yes. In theory, I will provide more data-informed content once I have more data about what's going on in my system, right? But for the sake of keeping this relatively linear and non-complex right now, my content is my content. And what I'm then going to do is I'm going to drip in, right, using those sentences, right, those grammatical sentences we talked about, right? They're called xAPI activity statements. And each one of those is a transaction of what happens. Right? And so this guy is going to, right, every time that the learning record provider, right, sends data, he's going to squeeze a pipette and a little drop is going to come out, right? And each one of those little drops is effectively an activity statement, right? And they're just going to go drip, 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 drip down into my beaker. Now, a profile, I like to think of the profile as like a jargon dictionary or a language dictionary. Right, that helps me make more sense of and consistency of my activity statements. Right? And there are a number of profiles. So there's a profile for things that look like e-learning. There's a profile for things that look like video and podcasts. There is a profile for how e-learning or other things launch from and work with and talk to learning management systems. And that's CMI5. So CMI5 is actually an activity or a statement profile, okay, within the xAPI environment. So it's not an either or. It's if you're running it out of an LMS, you would want CMI5 if you're using xAPI. And then I need a learning record store, or LRS. And the LRS is not an LMS. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. The learning record store is the name of the official database of xAPI. Okay? And its job is to receive and hold onto statements. And think about it, this guy can also stick this pipette into this beaker and suck data back out, right? So I can pipette data in from one learning experience, right, one learning record provider, and suck it out of another one and use it over somewhere else, right? So that also gets very, very interesting. Most learning record stores, right, the core of the learning record store is based on open source code you can get from the federal government, right? The US federal government. The learning record store itself should be consistent. There's even a conformance test to ensure that it does all the things it's supposed to do. Most learning record stores then add something fancy around the edges, right? Whether it's analytics or business rules or advanced statistics or something, right? Because otherwise it's just the same old open source stuff that everybody else has. Right? And then you have other data. So you have your old scorm data, you have business data, you have all sorts of other data to manage and to work with. Now, some people have said, can I do xAPI without the learning record store? And sometimes I think it's like, well, there are free learning record stores that you can try, right? But you actually need a learning record store. So think what would happen if he didn't have a learning record store. He would be dripping data all over the floor. It'd be spread out. It wouldn't be collectible, and he'd have a gigantic waste of time mess that he's now got to clean up. Right? So you really need the learning record store. Otherwise, your data just kind of goes off into oblivion. Yes, there are clever and technical ways around it, or some simplified ways around it. But for the 98% of the time use cases, you'll want a learning record store of some sort. A quick look at statements. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time looking at statements because there's more in future weeks, right? But my xAPI statements allow me, take a look at some of these like really run-on sentences. I can start doing some really interesting stuff that allows me a lot more interest and granularity than I get with scorm, right? With scorm, I get this. Right? With xAPI, I can even dig so far deeply, right? This is why I love my run-on sentences. I can figure out what's going on with instructor Tim, or what was going on October 20th, 2019, right? So all sorts of really interesting things that I can be doing with xAPI. Now, this list, this is all in human readable form. I can even put the language translations within an xAPI statement for the human readable form. But xAPI actually looks like this also. There's a machine readable form. And by the end of this cohort, if you can't already, right, you will have seen many of these and be able to pick through what it is that you need, right, to be able to start reading this information and picking out the insights, right? And of course, great insights, right? That picking out insights, picking out information. Insights come from having a whole lot of these and being able to run some interesting analytics, right? These are the kinds of insights you might be able to capture with xAPI, right? These are the kinds of things that as instructional designers, we're super interested in, right? But also I want to make sure that I'm really, really upfront about this, right? The magic of xAPI is not the technology. You can do all the things on this slide without xAPI. Okay? Straight up old web programming will get you this just fine. Okay? But it's probably not as interoperable as you would want it. The magic of xAPI isn't the technology. The magic of xAPI is the agreement of an entire industry to speak the same language and to be able to share that data. And that's pretty cool. So in this, right, cohort, you'll have an opportunity to get started, right? And so you can, right, and we're going to dive more deeply into these. So I'm going to go through these super fast so I can turn it back over to Jess in about 5 minutes, right? First, you want to send your data. And there's about 5 different ways that you are going to send your data, right? This first one here, using your e-learning authoring tools, is where a lot of people start because you've already got the tools and you don't need any programming to be able to use them, right? All the way down to writing some custom code or importing from some other source. And xAPI projects have absolutely been about writing custom code or importing from other sources of data, like, I don't know, Zoom, right? All sorts of interesting ways. And AirMate, by the way, there will be a really interesting AirMate data stream that could absolutely be converted to xAPI. So there's lots and lots of authoring tools that already have some degree of xAPI support. Some of them are going to have more xAPI support than others, okay? But many of them are also extensible. This article in Learning Solutions Magazine is a really, really good one if you are using xAPI with e-learning authoring tools. It's a little bit dated, but most of things have not changed much since 2019. There are lots of data providers that use xAPI, right? Including tools that never really planned on being learning tools necessarily, right? So there's lots and lots of stuff that sends xAPI data. And then you need to receive data, right? So we talked about the learning records store and how it's not a learning management system. Your learning management system hosts courses, it manages users, right? It sends messages and nudges when you haven't done your training. It knows who hasn't completed something. Your LRS does not know this. So if you have a learning management system, it's entirely possible you still need one. Okay? You can get a learning record store on the side. There's lots of them, several of them, some of which give free trials, okay, here during cohort and just generally. There are a few enterprise LMSs that have LRSs inside, right? And what you're looking for often is this CMI5, okay, in order to make sure that that works in a way that you expect it to. Okay. There are LMSs that offer some degree of xAPI support. I also want to call your attention to this big red bar on each one of these slides because this list is growing, it is incomplete, and sometimes systems will move off of this list and onto another list. I know at least one that is in the process of doing exactly that, right? So the good news is that this industry is constantly in flux, and therefore my slide deck is constantly out of date. Right. And then there's some LMSs that support xAPI by sending their data out, right? So somebody mentioned Canvas, and I don't know that they do have or don't have an xAPI integration. I should check, but that sounds like that would be what they were doing here. Okay. So we're receiving our data, right? We're sending our data, we're receiving our data. There's a bunch of different ways of how we integrate this with LRS. And then your last bit is to do something with your data. And so xAPI cohort projects are typically involved with the sending and receiving of data, but some of them end up being working on doing the something with the data, right? How do I visualize it? How do I use it in a downstream system to do something else? How do I kick off some sort of event based on the existence of a particular xAPI statement in a particular LRS at a particular time? Okay. So all of that is some of the really cool possibilities that we have when we start using xAPI. All right, Jess, how do we get engaged with this with cohort? And what I'm going to do is I am going to cruise through the chat and just see if there's any questions that I need to catch up with.
Yeah, absolutely. And feel free to stay on mic if there are. I wasn't seeing any though. All right. I am. All right. So thank you, Megan, for talking a little bit about what xAPI is and sharing how we use it and giving that overview. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how you participate in cohort and the different ways that happens and what that looks like. The first thing that I want to mention, and feel free to chime in, Megan, is that all of our code and anything that we're creating in Cohort is licensed under the Apache 2.0 license. And what does that mean? It means you can do essentially anything and access any of the code, but you cannot sue any of the contributors if it doesn't work. So if you take the code and you apply it to a commercial project, and it doesn't work and it's not functional, you're not going to come back and try to have a lawsuit against those who contributed to that. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention there regarding the Apache 2.0 license, Megan?
I think you pretty well covered it, Jess. We're not lawyers. We don't want to have to hire any. We do this as a free labor of love. And really our goal with xAPI Cohort is that we're sharing this in an environment that is as free and open source as the specification is itself. Don't sue your colleagues.
Thanks, Megan. Yep, we want to make sure that this is open source, easy to use, accessible, but that we're a friendly environment, and recognize that we're all here learning. Okay, so there are 3 levels that we talk about when we talk about participating in Cohort. And that first level is project mode, right? So this might mean you're coming to Cohort with an idea that you want to work on, right? The ways that you can kind of start and get jump started on that, you can, one, I would suggest peruse all of the Slack channels, and I'll in a few slides down the line, we'll look at what Slack looks like right now, and see if there's anything that aligns to that, right? If you have a storyline project, there might already be a Slack channel dedicated to that. But the project mode is, aha, I have an idea and I want to work on it. So one way that you can work on it is set up the Slack channel, and then go into the main Slack channel, which is a full cohort conversation, and invite people to join you. And then you can start ideating, talking, meeting, convening with folks in order to generate interest and delegate and start doing some of that work. The second level is something we call observer mode. And that means I don't really have an idea of a project. I'm just here to learn. And what we suggest you do there is start by checking out the Slack team channels, right? So the notation with team in the front designates that that's a team or a project team that had worked on something in the past, and see what looks good to you. And just hop right in. You can contribute ideas, you can attend meetings, maybe they might delegate you some work to do, but just know that just joining the Slack channel doesn't commit you to anything. You can just be an observer if that's what you feel you're ready for this semester. And then the third level is just web session mode, right? Like, I just want to generally learn more about xAPI. I'm here for these web sessions to get the education, but I might not want to participate in a project yet or be highly engaged in that level. That is completely fine. In fact, one of the things that I really love about Cohort is that it's very, very learner driven, meaning you can engage at any level, in any frequency, in any way that you see fit for your schedule. So maybe you hop in and you start doing project mode right away, you're ready. And then towards the middle of the semester, you start to notice you don't have that much capacity. Transparent communication with your team to let them know. You can hop in and hop out as you see fit. We really do want this to be as personalized as possible so that you get the most out of your experience, which means that it's very self-driven. All right, so where is the magic happening? Where is Cohort happening? Right here on Air Meet, we have our weekly web sessions. I saw that almost 30 folks were joining before the session started to do some networking. We will every week open up around 1:30 so that you can hop into the networking tables and meet one another and have conversations. So feel free to join in around 1:30 every week, but our web sessions start 1:30 Eastern time. Our web sessions start at 2 p.m. Eastern time. Cohort is also happening in Slack, and there are team and cohort conversations. There's even a job board and a free stuff channel. So Slack, it has, as I put in chat, over 3,800 people already in there. And we don't just add people who are in our Slack community directly back to Cohort. So that's why you're seeing some differences between the 464 number of folks who are registered for the fall 2020 cohort and that 3.8 thousand member in our Slack channel. So you can be a member of our community forever being in Slack, but you do have to self-select each semester if you want to be added to our mailing list and want to participate in Cohort. We don't just want to send you things that you've not elected to do. Github is where your team has its website and its repository. And we will at a later date kind of walk through how to set up your GitHub and how to navigate that. And plus we offer, I really appreciated how Megan called out in chat that we are a vendor neutral space, but we are vendor supported, meaning that we have a variety of free tools and experiences offered by xAPI vendors for cohort participants. And in our Slack channel, you'll see all of those tools and resources. All right. So this is kind of a list of what our Slack looks like today. And I will be going through our teams and archiving using our ZZ notation. I never fully archive teams in case they want to come back. The teams that don't seem to be fully active. So in that red box, you see demos and vendor offers. That's that free stuff channel. You can hop into that channel and see what's offered currently. It will continue to grow. Things will continue to be updated, but that's how we share out the free vendor supported offerings for our cohort participants. In that orange box where we have discuss as the starting notation, that's where we have conversations, not projects. They're topics, they're around technologies, there's jobs, right? Like folks are adding jobs. And I know a few folks who have gotten jobs through their connections in cohort. I love to hear those stories. In that middle section where we have main, meetups, requesting GitHub access, resources, and social, those are cohort-wide conversations, right? Social is just a fun conversation place where we can have cohort-wide conversations. Resources are resources that we can share to one another. Anything that has the meetup in front of it was back in the day. We're less meeting up in person nowadays, but we used to meet up regionally because folks were able to convene across the shared interest in xAPI, and we wanted to support that. And then main is our main channel where you'll see our reminders, you'll see our any conversations in the industry that's coming up. I invited all of you to introduce yourself in that channel. So our main channel is our most active. And then in yellow, in that yellow box, that's where we have our project teams. And what you'll notice is that our project teams are topical, technology. We might even have some company teams. I will note that for company teams, we are under the Apache 2.0 open source license. So if there's information you don't want out there that needs to be private, we can set up a private channel for you, but you'll need to let us know first. And that's kind of how Cohort works in Slack. And you'll need to search for it. You're not automatically added to all of the channels. If there's something on this list that you see that you're interested in, you're going to need to add yourself to that channel if you're not already a part of it. And if you're perusing teams starting today and you want to look and see what's happening and what these teams have been doing, you can easily do that by clicking. You're going to click and search for teams, put the notation of team, and all the teams will happen. Once you join a team, you can look at the description and what they're doing to learn more about that team, learn who created it. And then you can, from there, ask the person who created it or look through the past conversation to see what they've been doing. You can also check their team website on xAPIcohort.com and then go to the teams section and see what teams have done in the past semester. If you really want to go through and start digging through what teams have been doing in cohort thus far. On GitHub, and GitHub every semester is a pretty, first of all, it's a really important tool for us to use for cohort because it is where you have your team webpage. And when you go to xAPIcohort.com and you go to the teams tab, that table is populated through the team's GitHub. So it's really important that each team have a GitHub that they're submitting their weekly status updates on, because that's going to allow us to converse and share out in these web sessions. And also it's maintains some of the historical data of what teams have been doing over the semester. So if you need support getting connected to GitHub, and we'll do a tutorial in one of our web sessions in the next 2 weeks where we walk you through how to join. But we really, really want to make sure that all of our teams who are active in cohort this semester get their GitHub page set up so that way all of that information is filtered. Why is there value for GitHub for you? Well, it's a file repository. It's a collaborative workspace where your teams can collaborate on that repository. And it is your historical site, right? It's going to house your project brief, your files, your projects, your progress, and allow you you can use it as a portfolio sample, right? Where you can go and demo that out and show that with maybe a future employer. But for me and for Cohort, it's really going to help me understand what your team is going through. As you can imagine, with 464 people and over 3,000 people in Slack, we're not going to be able to get updated from you directly every week, but this serves as a great resource for us to be able to see what's going on and what you need and share that out in our Cohort web sessions. You can go to our Teams page now and see teams from the past right on the website. All right. So we're ending, we're getting to the end of this first web session. And I want to just reassure you that if you're like, oh, this is so exciting, but I just don't know what to do. It's completely okay to not know anything about xAPI right now. I hope you learned a little bit from Megan's presentation, but if you didn't and you still need support, that's perfectly fine. We're just in week 1. It's also okay to know a whole lot about xAPI. I see some veteran xAPI cohorters who know so much about xAPI, and we're grateful you're here as well. It's completely okay to not know anything about coding, to not know anything about coding at the end of Cohort, to not be or to be an expert developer who's looking for a great project. It's completely okay to not have any idea what to do for a team right now, or to have an idea for a team, but have no one in your group, or to continue a project from a prior cohort. It's completely okay to not join a team at all, to join lots of Slack channels, but not work on a team, to just watch the recorded web sessions, to start a project and not finish with it, to join a project team many weeks into the work, to just be on our mailing list in case. It's not okay to sell your stuff. It's not okay to create an unwelcoming environment. And I want to go really in on this. One of my pride points of hosting Cohort is the fact that we are an accessible and diverse community from all over the world. We have folks with different skill levels, different perspectives, different backgrounds, all coming together over a shared interest in xAPI. What that means is we get to welcome diversity in our spaces and create accessible learning opportunities. When we create unwelcoming environments that might shame someone for what they do or don't know, or kind of shut folks down for their contributions, we're not upholding some of the standards and really key values that make Cohort what it is. It's not okay to work out loud on your company's proprietary projects. And it's not okay to sue your teammates for bad ideas. Remember, we're under that Apache 2.0 license. All right, and we're officially right at the end of our first web session. And I just want to remind you that we're here weekly at 2 p.m. Eastern via AirMeet. That link is included in the bio of our Gnome. It is also on our website. And it will also be emailed to you and put in Slack every week. So you shouldn't miss the link. Next week, we have Jeff Batt and Matt Cleaver talking about how to send data from e-learning. And I just want to put a mini plug here around the xAPI party, which is not necessarily a party. It is a conference, but it's a convening of folks who are interested in xAPI. It's on December 10th, and our event to sign up for that is already online on our website. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to message me in Slack or email xapicohort@torrancelearning.com. With that, I hope that you have an awesome Thursday and an awesome weekend. And we're really glad to have seen over 100 people here in this first session.
Welcome, everybody. And thanks, Jess. This is going to be exciting.
Super excited too, y'all. I'm just seeing the chat.
No, you're getting a shout out for your awesome new glasses, by the way.
They're great.
Now, we've had lots of really great great engagement in the chat. Hello, Judy. Good to see you. And we've been keeping up with chat pretty well. Lots of love.
Awesome.
And actually, Erin and Jess, do we know, is the chat saved along with the recording of these?
I don't know.
I think we're about to find out.
We are. We are. And I think I'll stop I think Aaron has to stop the recording.
All right. Hey, thanks,
right.
everybody.
Have a great weekend.